Well, hello, and I want to start this episode with a question. Do you ever feel like you are literally the only person who knows how to do anything correctly? Anybody? Raise your hand. What if I told you that that might just be an illusion and that other people could be pretending to be less competent than they actually are to get you to do more than your share? Wow. Let that sink in. So, in today's episode, I'm breaking down what weaponized incompetence is, right? It's sometimes also called strategic incompetence. And I'm giving you some questions that you can ask yourself to see, is this happening in your life? And some thoughts about how you can step back from overfunctioning, because that's really what it is about. So before we get started, if you're new to my channel, please introduce yourself down below, because we are a friendly bunch. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that you can get notified when we roll out new videos to help you live your very best life every single Tuesday and sometimes Thursdays too. So if you don't know me, my name is Terri Cole, and I am the author of this book right there, Boundary Boss, which you can get at boundarybossbook.com. I'm also a psychotherapist and a relationship expert and a boundary expert. So I want to say thank you for all of your participation, all of your comments. I so appreciate it. And in every episode, I try to highlight one of your comments. So in this episode, I'm highlighting a comment that came in from TJ on the episode called Discover Your Attraction Type. He says, my girlfriend introduced me to you before the end of 2021. I admit I have viewed your videos like a daily learning tool. I thank her very much and appreciate your insights. We're going to put in the work this year, and you've helped us so much. So it's funny. I appreciate that, TJ. And it's funny. It's like you're confessing. I must admit. Well, I'm grateful that you are finding these videos on YouTube a helping tool for you. So now let's move into today's content. Simply put, what is weaponized incompetence or strategic incompetence? It's really when one person is pretending that or exaggerating their inability to perform a task, no matter how simple, no matter how complex that task is, in order to really shift the responsibility, the burden of that task from them to you. That is basically what it is. And listen, this can happen anywhere. At work, with kids, partners, friends, a team at work. If you find that you're doing more than your share, this can happen anywhere. So I would say that this term itself, weaponized incompetence, was coined pretty recently. It's a manipulation tactic. It was coined in 2007, I believe. And when you think about what it really is, it's a passive-aggressive way of getting your way with someone. Instead of being direct and being honest, it is a duplicitous, right? Like a not honest way of getting someone else to do something. Now, if you want to learn more about this or see what a phenomenon weaponized incompetence is, go on TikTok and put in the hashtag weaponized incompetence. And it's unbelievable how many people are talking about it. Now, in a traditional sense, a lot of times in a patriarchal system, we see in heteronormative or heterosexual relationships, it has traditionally been housework and kids has traditionally been assigned to the female, and making the money and whatever else assigned to the male. So a lot of what you'll see on TikTok is stories of one woman says, this is what my house looks like. You know, she's showing you her house. It's a complete and total disaster. There is like paint everywhere. There's wet paper towels everywhere. Like it just looks like a hurricane came in. And she basically says, this is what happened when I left my kids with my husband for 90 minutes. So think about it this way. Anytime you hear someone talking about this in this way, like a father saying he's babysitting, you're like, no, you're not babysitting because those are your kids. You're actually just parenting, which is not the same thing. And actually with that woman I'm referring to, and I'll put some of these links in the show notes so you guys can see them. that woman eventually, you see that she's a single mom of 3 kids now. So sometimes it is so bad that it can really ruin relationships. Because another thing that people will do is they will, and this is also passive aggressive behavior, falls under that category, the umbrella of passive aggressive, is they will do the thing you ask them to do, but they will do it very badly. So if you are an overfunctioning perfectionist, that will drive you more crazy. So how much of the time, and really think about this for yourself in your life, do you say, okay, it's just easier if I do it myself? Because here's the thing, it is until it isn't. Because that is a one-way ticket to bitter land. I don't care who you are. There's no way that you're going to be doing 90% of the work in a family system or in a group at work or in a friendship and not eventually feel used and abused, because that is what it is. So, and listen, let's make a distinction. Most couples, they share responsibilities a specific or particular way, right? In my relationship, my husband does things that he's good at. So a lot of that does have to do with more outside stuff. He takes care of the animals, the geese, the chickens. He fixes anything, and that's because he's great at that. And I plan all of our travel and do things like that because he would just buy a ticket for $7,000. You know what I mean? Like he's not great at comparing prices, but we share the other domestic things like doing laundry and like cooking and like making the bed and emptying the dishwasher. The way I do it in my home is that none of those things, we both are independent contractors. We both work from home. We've both had our own businesses for decades. So there isn't this situation where it's like, well, I'm home taking care of little kids and he's out working. That has never been our situation. So we are not unique in the fact that we have designated things that we know one person is better at. I make most of the doctor's appointments because I'm better at keeping track of those things, and I don't mind doing it. We have a shared calendar. I don't feel put upon, though, because we talk all the time. So the things I'm doing, I'm not doing them because Vic can't do them, won't do them, or is doing them badly to dominate me, right? Because that would be a horse of a different color. I'm doing them because we've talked about it. And this is part of my labor. And the other things he does is part of his labor. I want to make sure that I'm being clear that that's not what I'm talking about, right? Even if you guys in your relationship, if you have things that you're better at and you do it, and your spouse, your partner has things that they're better at and they do that, that makes sense. This is all about one person really holding the bag when it comes to a family of origin. We're talking about emotional labor, right? The invisible, unpaid work. So much of it has to do. This is so much of what we have to do to keep a home, a family afloat. So much of it is invisible. Pretty much all of it is unpaid, right? This is just what we do. Like the toilet paper does not buy itself or put itself on the roll. Other things that you'll see on TikTok, if you go look at that hashtag, is you'll see someone making it like funny, like things that my partner does that make no sense. And then she's going around her house and she's like, instead of putting the toilet paper, we see it's set upon the roll instead of being in the roll. And then you see that the partner is leaving open all of the cabinets and leaving open drawers and putting a wet towel on the bed. And this is supposed to be funny, haha. And yet I saw it and it just pissed me off. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about what is going on here. So I've got a couple of points that I want to make, and I want you to really be thinking about where you are in the mix of what I'm talking about. First things first, this is for sure a boundary issue. It's an internal boundary issue and an external boundary issue. This falls into the category of overfunctioning, of not knowing what is your side of the street, of being probably codependent. There's all of these things that go along with this when you're a super overfunctioner. But disordered boundaries is definitely part of what's going on. The next thing I want to talk about is I want you to recognize how you are colluding with the person who is pretending they're incompetent by picking up the slack. So you have a silent agreement that if they don't do it, you will do it. Or if they don't do it well, you will do it because you want it done a particular way. Now that's about you, if that's your situation. And think, you may be on the other end. You may be someone who is feigning incompetence because you don't want to learn how to do things. But this is really good food for thought for you to think about what are you doing in your relationships, whether it's work, friendships, or love relationships. Now, think about it at work. You have to decide how you're going to respond. Let's say it's a work situation where Betty in your office didn't make another pot of coffee, even though she drank the last cup of coffee from the last pot, because she says she can't figure out the coffee maker. She can't figure it out. She doesn't know how. And instead of just making the next pot, you might say, I actually think that you can learn, and I'm happy to show you so that you can do your part to keep us all caffeinated the way we need to be to get through the day. Or whatever. You can use a little tongue-in-cheek. But how you are going to stop feeling victimized by this, if you are doing everything because everyone else seems to be incompetent, you have to look at what you're doing, your role. What is your 50% in what is happening? There has to be boundaries, and those boundaries are exactly what I just said. I think you can learn, and I'm happy to teach you because I'm not happy to be the only person who makes a pot of coffee in this office when you are perfectly capable of making a pot of coffee, Betty. So I'll teach you. Now, you can say it nicer than that or meaner than that, depending on how you feel about Betty. But it's really important that you don't automatically overfunction, because if you do, you will continue to stay in this situation. So you have to look at your kids, right? Are they feigning incompetence because they know you'll overfunction? If they're like, but you do it better, or I don't know how to do it the same way that you do. You have to, part of the whole thing with kids is that we want to teach them how to be in the world. Competency is part of your mandate as a parent, is to teach that kid to do things. So instead of centering the whole thing around you, like, I'll fix it, I'll do it, be a patient teacher and take the time and communicate to them. I believe in you. I think that you can do it. I have no doubt you can learn it. I will patiently teach you how to do it. Because really, if you don't, you end up sending, young adults into the world who don't have the basic skills to take care of themselves. It's infantilizing. And we don't want to do that because it is super unhealthy. And again, all kinds of disordered boundaries in that scenario. Okay, I think that we have to think about this. If you believe that selective or strategic incompetence is negatively impacting your relationship and you are on the receiving end of this, I think that you have to make a list of all the things that you're doing, all of the emotional labor, all of the stuff that you're doing to keep the ship of your lives together afloat. And then you have to have a conversation about your partner taking on more responsibilities. But here's the key, is that it's not just if your partner's like, okay, well then remind me on Friday to take out the garbage. No. If you're going to take responsibility for your half of that list, whoever it is, each person who has those responsibilities on their list are fully responsible from beginning to middle to end. There's no one person who has to remind the other person, because this is also where resentment comes in and where a lot of passive-aggressive domination can happen. So, and listen, it might take more than one conversation, but really understanding that if you have a partner who is not pulling their weight, who is feigning incompetence so that you do more of the work, it's really hard to relate to that person as an adult. It's literally like having another child. Not sexy, not interesting, and it's exhausting for the person who is doing all of the overfunctioning, but I feel like there's an onus on both parties to change what they're doing. There needs to be a real conversation about what is happening and why it's happening and how do we make it stop happening. And that is going to be hard if you're afraid of having a real conversation. But I promise you, you can do it. And in the guide that goes along with this episode, I'm going to be giving you some things to look at, some questions to answer, and I'll give you a couple of sentence starters or a way that you can sort of script this conversation if you want to have this conversation with your partner or maybe with someone that you work with, how you can even start it. So I'll give you a sentence starter or two to make it a bit easier. But here's the thing. You deserve to be in relationships that are mutual. And you're really not a victim if you are colluding with the other person's behavior. So you have to have the courage to call them out, whether it is a teenage kid, whether it is your partner, whether it's your partner at work. I mean, if it's a boss, that's a different story because now you have a power, right? There's a power dynamic happening there. But in our actual lives with the people we are voluntarily having relationships with, like parenting isn't just one person's job, right? If you have children, parenting is both of your jobs. And you can figure out what is equitable if one person is staying home with children. What is equitable if the other person is making the bulk of the money? I don't think that having the person who's staying home be responsible for everything else is actually equitable. That was definitely the way it was in my family of origin, where my father made the money. That was pretty much it. My mother did everything else. So I was super clear before I got into any kind of long-term relationship that sure as heck was not going to be me. And I purposefully never learned how to cook or type in my 20s because I was afraid someone would then expect me to do those things and I didn't want to. Can you imagine? I used to always say I can't cook and my mother would be like, hello, you don't want to cook and that's okay. But if you can read, you can cook, Terri. So just stop saying you can't. Just say you don't want to. And that is your right not to want to. I was like, I don't want to cook. She's like, fantastic. So anyway, I hope that this added value to your life. I'm so curious to know what you think about everything that I talked about in this episode, because I have to say, my mind was really blown that I had not heard of this. I mean, passive aggressive behavior, sure, but this feigning incompetence, this weaponized incompetence, I was like, wow, this is something to talk about. So I would love to know what you think about it. So please drop me your comments in all the many places. If you like this, please share it on your social media outlets. And thank you for being a part of my crew. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Have an amazing week. And as always, take care of you.